Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. This is the Hackerspaces panel. I'm very happy. I'm Nick Farr. My Hackerspace is HackDC. And I'm going to leave the rest of the introductions of this wonderful group of panelists that we have assembled here to Jens Oleg. So if you could give him a quick round of applause before he introduces everybody, that'd be great. Thank you.
So yeah, it's a bit crowded up here, but we have collected some people from all over the world for a big panel on hackerspaces, that is physical places where hackers make things. And right next to me, I'll introduce the panelists next. Right next to me is Bree Pettis, representing New York City Resistor, a hackerspace in Brooklyn, New York City. And next to him is Nick Farr from Washington, D.C., representing HackDC, but he also has some stories to share about what was before hackerspace movement in the US. Then there is Esther Schneeweiss, or Astera, from hackerspaces.org and representing also the Meta Lab. Next to her is Philippe Langlois, representing TempLab, but also the French hackerspace community in total. And we have Jake Applebaum from San Francisco, from the hackerspace Noisebridge. And last but not least, Enki Polböhm from Vienna, from MetaLab, and also one of the minds behind hackerspaces.org. Yeah. So, a lot of things happened. Thank you. So yesterday I got the chance to speak to some of the panelists. Most of them couldn't even remember what happened since last year because it felt also distant, also far away. So many things had happened just in that 1 year. And I think it's safe to say that, things in the area of building collaborative spaces for hackers changed a lot just in the last 12 months. It was only at the camp in 2007 that some of the panelists got the inspiration for actually building a hackerspace, and that the whole movement got some momentum. And well, now look, we can barely fit all the people involved on this at this table. Maybe we should start with Nick Farr and giving us the backstory of what inspired some of the panelists. Some of the hackerspaces are a little older, but some of the panelists to start their hackerspace in 2007.
Actually, I'd like to go, if possible, I'd like to go back a little bit earlier than that. My first Congress was the 23C3 several years ago, and at the time I was coming here to talk about the Hacker Foundation, and this is, I've told many people this privately, but I guess it's the first time I admitted publicly that at the 25C3, I was actually, or 23C3, I was actually really depressed with the state of the hacker scene in the United States, and it was when I came here that I was actually incredibly inspired. I was inspired by what was going on here at the Congress. I was inspired by what was going on at the Seabase, and at the Seabase, at the 23C3, just partying there and hanging out, it finally clicked in with me that what we were missing in the United States were hacker spaces that were open to the public, that anyone in the local community could come in and join and hack on things and, you know, code with other people, find other people that they didn't know that had similar interests. And it was this physical infrastructure that was public and open. We've had hacker spaces that were private. You know, the Loft is a good example, the Walnut Factory, the Hasty Pastry, all these private spaces that were very hidden and not known about. And what I believe we were missing in the United States were these public hacker spaces. And from that, and at the Seabase and at the 23C3, we came up with the idea for Hackers on a Plane. The idea being that I figured that if I were to bring really inspiring, awesome Americans like people that we see here, people from North America, this includes the United States, Canada, if we were to bring them here to Germany and show them hackerspaces and show them the camp and show them all the wonderful things that are going on here in the CCC and in Germany, that they would be inspired and they would go back to the United States and they would start doing over there exactly what had been going on here for many, many years. And I'm proud to say that's exactly what happened. Those of you who know Hackers on a Plane was a mildly stressful time for me personally, a little bit, but it was wonderful. I mean, that's where, Bree was on that trip, and it was great to have him, and he started a wonderful hackerspace that he's going to tell you more about. Jake was on that trip, and many people who are sitting here in the third row are involved in hackerspaces that came out as a direct result of that NYC Resistor was born in the basement of the C4 in Cologne. And I'm eternally grateful to Jens, especially. Actually, Jens is a very, very important part of this. Without him, Hackers on a Plane would have been a complete disaster instead of only the mild disaster that it was. And if I could just, anybody who has anything to do with hackerspaces or has been inspired by anything that's been going in the US, please give Jens a gigantic, gigantic, heartfelt round of applause. Please just join me in thanking him. At the C4, he came up with this speech, which many of you have seen and has been given here at the Congress. It's been given at Hope. It's been given many other times in many private places. It's been posted very thoroughly. These hackerspace design patterns that he came up with are the fundamental building blocks of many of the hackerspaces that you see sprouting up in the United States right now. And so is that where you wanted me to finish about?
Well, you mentioned NYC Resistor, and I think if we move in the timeline of what happened after that summer and after that tour that you took Americans on visiting hackerspaces, I think the C-Base was in it, and MetaLab in Vienna, other hackerspaces in other parts of Germany. And I think the first hackerspace that actually came out of that inspiration was NYC Resistor. So I will let Bree talk briefly about that.
When there was this idea, I was sitting around. Before I lived in New York, I lived in Seattle and would spend a lot of my times at Hackerbot Labs, which is a space in Seattle. And I was sitting around, and they were like, hey, you should go on this Hackers on a Plane tour. And then as soon as I signed up, they were like, you just paid $1,337 to the Hacker Foundation. Ha 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 ha. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And we went, and it was really magical. And then after 2 weeks of going to the camp, being completely dazzled, overdosing on Club Mate, and traveling around, and then we went to MetaLab, we went to C4, Entropia, Das Labor, which is filled with hard hacking goodness, and all these other. We did as much as we could in like 2 weeks, and finally we ended up at C4, and I was talking to George, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm from New York." We realized after spending 2 weeks with each other that we were basically from the same place, and we just kind of decided, okay, well, what if we did this? And we started. Like 4 hours later, we brute forced the name NYC Resistor because it was available, and then we just started meeting every week, every Tuesday, and it started out with 3 people, and it was like 3 people for like 4 weeks, and we just started scheming up how to make it bigger, made up this idea of the microcontroller study group to kind of like find people who are of the same kind of mind, who are into it, and then the right people just got involved, and we just kept going. And it was one of those things that once 4 people decided that it was going to exist, it was like there was no stopping it. And at this point, I'm pretty sure it's just going to keep going no matter what any one of us has to do.
Yeah, and from that on, hackerspaces just like mushroomed. Next was Hack DC, and then later there was something in San Francisco, and we will get to that later definitely. But as you know, it's the same in the computer world as in social phenomena. There's really nothing new in the world. Whatever you try, there is always someone who has thought of it before. And I think one of the biggest inspirations in putting a lot of thought in how to build a hackerspace in a sustainable way was Enki, and he kind of built a model hackerspace with MetaLab in Vienna. So maybe you can just briefly say a few words about the thoughts you gave in building the MetaLab.
Yeah, so I think I'll go a little bit back because some of the people here have never been to a hackerspace. So the idea of MetaLab was that Vienna had a lot of people doing really awesome things with hardware and software, and they barely met. They met at the Congress, some of them, some met at some user groups or online in forums, but there was no place where you could meet, where you could work on projects, and where you just could get a feel for what's happening in your city, conceive new ideas, start working, buy expensive hardware, and all the tools you need to do stuff, to really create things, to make things, to change things. And so our idea was basically taking a few of the hints we took from the organization structure of Chaos Computer Club and of C-Base, and say we want something that's more general, that's not focused on any specific subject. We just want a place where we don't even know what people do cool projects in the city and what are these projects. And so we wanted a space that's just infrastructure. And I think that's the most basic definition of a hackerspace. It's a place where you have infrastructure to work on projects, where you have a social network of people also working on projects who can inspire you and help you with your projects. And for us, this process started 4 years ago when we were meeting at, actually 2 people back then were meeting at a local civil liberties union called Quintessence. We were hanging out there, and they were so focused on their projects, and we like to participate in those projects, but we just found out we have other interests that don't fit into the specific mold of this organization. We need a more general organization that just provides space. And after a while, we talked to people within the city, we organized events, and we kind of figured out the key essence to make this happen. It's just to get enough people excited about the thing, make a list, let people write their name on it and say, I'm paying 20 euros a month, and if 40 people do this, we can afford a really cool space. And yeah, that's how MetaLab started. And I think the most important lessons we learned there were, don't let the state of your city discourage you. Vienna was a very bleak place for net culture and hacker culture. Very few people knew each other, but things were definitely happening. But now we are one of the largest, probably the largest hackerspace that got founded in the last 5 years, with over 130 paying members and 300 to 400 people around it. We've got a really nice space directly next to the city hall, and all this happened because it was a bleak space, because people were energetic, they wanted change in the city. And the other lesson we learned is, don't be scared. If you don't think you can finance it, try it. Just go to people, say, if we find enough people, will you pay? Sign your name here. Only if we find enough people. Don't solve problems that don't exist. Just focus on building energy, meeting people, getting things done.
Yeah, that's really one point that is important to remember. People will always tell you, but in my city it's different. We have different problems, and everyone will tell you that, you know, because every city is different, but it's basically just the same problems. So one of the things that got their inspiration almost directly from MetaLab was, I think, the French hackerspace movement. And Phil even went the extra mile, and last summer, I think, he organized a hackerspace fest in Paris, and I'm still very angry at myself that I couldn't make it there, but I've heard it was a really great conference. So could you please tell me what happened there?
Okay, so just to make the connection with MetaLab, for us, two very big examples for the Temp Lab were Seabase and MetaLab.